Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And I did a video last week, but if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Saying which players or coaches are on the hot seat for this upcoming year. So I figured I'd do kind of the opposite, I guess which is players I think will break out this season who will become superstars or stars or become one of the best players at their position this upcoming season. So with no further ado, let us get into it. Starting off with the Arizona Cardinals with Marvin Harrison Jr. and I agree. I mean, I said Marv was also in a make or break year because he's entering his third year and the team is gonna have to see that he is worth picking up that fifth year option. But I do think with a better offense, Mike LaFleur coming from that Sean McVay tree, hopefully the offense will be better, even though the QB position is not that great. Um, so hopefully the offense will be better and will be able to shine. Because remember, his rookie year, he had a really impressive rookie year. It wasn't, you know, the feat everybody thought it was, but he had over 800 yards. He had, I think, like 5 or 6 touchdowns. So he had a really good rookie year. Last year was disappointing because of the drops and um, the inconsistent play. So I do think he's both in a make or break year and also poised to break out and really become one of the best young receivers in the league. I'd also go maybe I don't know. I mean, there's not many players on the Cardinals team that really excites you as a a breakout player. So moving on to the Falcons, they say Xavier Watts, which I don't hate. I'd also maybe go Jalen Walker, um, two guys from this past year's class, who I think should only get better in the year two under Jeff Ulbrich. You might say Michael Penix, if he's the starter, maybe he breaks out with a better offensive mind and Kevin Stefanski. You could also maybe say Drake London, um, who is really good, really talented, but hasn't had like the feats of like elite receivers. So maybe under Kevin Stefanski, he can have like that breakout year that puts him in those top 10 conversations. Maybe James Pierce, another 2025 defensive pick that maybe now that his off the field concerns are gone, maybe he could break out and finally be Atlanta's pass rusher that they've desperately needed for a couple of seasons now. But on to the Baltimore Ravens, they go Malachi Starks, which I would say Starks has Walker on the offense. I think could finally be able to give the Ravens a legit wide receiver three, maybe even two, depending on how Bateman looks. I think Starks will get better. Like he was he was much better as the season went along, which a rookie DB, it's kind of hard to be great as a rookie, especially with the fact that you know you're coming into the league, you're playing against better receivers, tight ends, so it's a lot harder to stand out as rookie DBs. So I think Starks could have a breakout year. I could see Travis Jones, um, the defensive tackle for the Ravens, be able to step up. Had a really good year this past year. Was extended. I think the Ravens could definitely see maybe another even better year, especially with more help on that defensive line this upcoming year with Trey Hendrickson. Hopefully Nani Madubuike, Zion Young, Mike Green, like with the talent they've infused on that defensive line, Travis Jones could be able to, not have to carry that D line and be able to maybe have a breakout season, putting him in those conversations of like one of the best young defensive tackles in the league. Went on to the Bills. They go Jackson Halls, which is very interesting. Last year played, not that much because in a really crowded tight end room. So, you could see him break out. Although you have Dawson Knox, you have Dalton Kincaid. How much playing time is he really going to get? I was gonna say Cole Bishop um on the defensive side. Yeah. Yeah, now I guess the third year safety now out of Utah, who I think other new defensive coordinator, Jim Leonard had Leonard I think could have a breakout year. But those like a lot of the players, um, what's the word? Like a lot of the players are already proven. It's kind of hard to really pick out like a certain player to like break out when like they don't have many young players that like could be poised to take a leap the way other teams do. Moving on to the Panthers, they say Jalen Coker and Nick Stewart, which I think both guys could. Coker recently signed a contract extension with Carolina to keep him in the building for 3 more years since his rookie contract expires after this upcoming year. So he could have a breakout year. Bryce Young could have a breakout year, like finally be consistent, playing well. Now in year four, which is crazy to say. So I could see Coker having a breakout year. Nick Stewart, I agree. Him, maybe, and Princely Umamielen, both from last year's class, could possibly have those breakout seasons, especially with Jalen Phillips getting that huge contract. Carolina clearly believing that he could be their top edge. Scort and Umamielen could be able to wreak havoc. Um, Trying to think. There's not many other guys I would say, but yeah, I agree. Coker and Nick Scott could be um, potential breakout candidates to really help this Panthers team that has really been able to draft out the last couple of years. And with the free agency signings they've been able to hit on the last couple of years, the Panthers can be a dangerous team as long as Bryce Young and this team is more consistent week by week. Moving on to the Bears, they say Luther Burden, and I agree. You trade away DJ Moore um, to Buffalo, clearly saying that you want your two young receivers you drafted, Odunze and Burden, to step up, which Odunze could have that breakout year. Um, because he really a lot of people expected him to take over that wide receiver one role um entering this past season. So maybe with no more DJ Moore and year two under Ben Johnson, Odunze could really break out and be the consistent um game changer the Bears hoped he would be alongside Caleb Williams. Burden, I agree. Um Trying to think who else. Ugh. You could say maybe Kyle Monangai. And DeAndre Swift was really solid, but maybe Monangai with more touches could break out in year two. I think on the defensive side, there's not really many young studs that would have breakout seasons that I can think about. So, yeah. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals with Shamar Stewart. Maybe with a full year, since he's not going to be holding out for a contract extension, maybe a full year um, with the team in the off season, going through mini camp, training camp, like OTAs, all this stuff that he missed out on last year because he was holding out because of the contract stuff that the Bengals tried to do. So maybe with a full year under his belt, he'd be able to really um, become the pass rusher they hoped he would. Um, I'm trying to think who else. I mean, maybe DJ Turner, um, who was really solid last year on the defense. Maybe to under Al Golden, you could have this defense playing better. Um, Chase Brown is really consistent, but maybe he could finally have that emerging year a lot of young backs tend to have, especially him entering a contract year for the Bengals. It's kind of hard to think because Cincinnati, like, they brought in a lot of talent this offseason. A lot of those guys are proven. Maybe Boye Mafe could take that step from like good to great pass rusher, now being a team's sort of top guy. Because in Seattle, he was more of a rotation guy. So maybe with Cincinnati being like on the field more, maybe he could emerge as like the team's top pass rusher. You could also say maybe one of the receivers they drafted the last couple of years, Andre Yosivas, Jermaine Burton, maybe one of those guys could um, step up and be the third receiver to give this Bengals offense, more consistent guys outside of Higgins, Chase, and Gesicki in the passing game. Moving on to the Browns, they have a couple guys, Harold Fannin and Mason Graham. I mean, I can see a lot of guys like Fannin, Judkins, both on the offense, Cedric Tillman entering a contract year, maybe. Because we've seen flashes from him, but maybe with Todd Monken, new offense, maybe these guys can emerge as top players. Dylan Sampson, the other running back they took in 2025, um maybe he's able to with Judkins maybe missing a couple of weeks due to his injuries he suffered late last season. Maybe um Sampson would be able to come in and what's the word? And maybe show that like they can be both really good backs and you don't have to rely on one. Mason Graham could have a breakout year. Was really solid last year, but clearly, um, like was really solid and worth the top pick. But wasn't the impact maybe the Browns hoped. You maybe could say Jared Verse, the new Brown, who has been amazing for those first 2 years, but maybe on a Browns defense where he is like the top guy on that defensive line, maybe he could step up and truly become that elite pass rusher most people, know him to be. Or maybe Carson Schlesinger, after winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, takes the next step to being like a superstar at linebacker. Um, Martin Emerson maybe takes that next step because I think he's entering a contract year. So you have Denzel Ward on one side trying to figure out the second corner. Although they do have Tyson Campbell, so maybe Emerson could be like that slot guy for this Browns defense. But Cleveland has a lot of young guys who, if this coaching staff does work out, this team could have loads of talent for years to come, which I feel like is a thing not many people say about the Browns. For the Cowboys, they say both Donovan Ezraku and DeMarvion Overshown, which, I mean, I could see both. I mean, Overshown, if it wasn't for his injury he suffered in 2024, I think it was, he could have had a breakout season that year, or even 2025 if he played the whole season and the defense was better. So he definitely fully healthy, recovered from that injury, definitely could break out. I mean, Ezraku, when drafted wasn't supposed to be the Micah replacement, but was supposed to be the Demarcus Lawrence replacement. Maybe he could step up on that defensive line that has gotten better. Um, you could also say maybe Javante Williams, who had a really good year, maybe he steps up and continues to have a productive season. Now that he's same offense, for the second consecutive year, which he only had for 2 years in Denver, and that was under Sean Payton when he was, wasn't really seen as the top back anymore, coming off the injury. Maybe Jalen Tolbert, breaks out, Pickens and Lamb will be the top two guys, but maybe Tolbert could solidify himself as that wide receiver three and really have this offense, being fully like having no real weaknesses that defenses could exploit. Moving on to the Broncos, they say Pat Bryant, which um, I think is interesting. I think he could have a much better year, but you know, you have Cortland Sutton, who consistently one of the best wide receivers that is never really talked about. They traded for Jalen Waddle, so clearly they have those two guys. So unless Bryant is like surpassing Sutton, which maybe given Sutton's age and um the fact that maybe he is not going to be with the team as long as maybe a lot of people think, maybe, but I go with maybe RJ Harvey. I mean, I know they brought back J.K. Dobbins and drafted Jonah Coleman, but maybe Harvey can show Sean Payton that he could be this um top running back for his team. Kind of like how Alvin Kamara was alongside Mark Ingram. Maybe RJ Harvey could be that guy. Kind of think on the defensive side, if there's anybody that could have a breakout season, maybe Janae Barron. Um, maybe he playing more, and after a solid rookie year, maybe he's able to um really explode, take over that CB2 role. Um, but I don't know. Pat Bryant, he'll probably have a better year because year two, players start to, especially skill position players, they're more adapted to the game and will be better. But you bring in Jalen Waddle, doesn't really seem like he's going to get more targets than he did last year. It seems like he'll probably get maybe less with another top dog in that room. Moving on to the Lions, they say Isaac Tesla, which maybe he could, um, but you still have Amon Ra and JMO in that wide receiver role. So maybe Tesla is able to have a bigger impact on the season, being that more consistent wide receiver three. Um, I would say maybe some of the guards, um, Tate Ravledge or Christian Mahogany, maybe they're able to step up and this offensive line, is much better and more healthier than it was last year to where the running game is able to thrive with Gibbs and now Pacheco. On the defensive side, maybe Terry and Arnold finally can figure it out, or some of the young DBs they've drafted recently. Maybe Tyleek Williams, the first round pick from last year. Maybe no more DJ Reader. Maybe he could step up and be able to what's the word? Maybe step up and be the defensive tackle that the team has needed for a couple seasons. Um, but the line's really solid. They do have some guys, like I mentioned, but I disagree with Tesla. Packers, they say Matthew Golden, or Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, I agree with Golden. Romeo Dobbs, they let leave in free agency for the Patriots. They trade away Dontavian Wicks, opening this wide receiver room, because they extended both Christian Watson and Jaden Reed, I'm pretty sure. So both guys, um, those are the top two guys, but Golden could, now that there's not as many mouths to feed in that receiver room, could be able to have a bigger role and be able to, possibly show off the talent that made the Packers believe he was a first round talent. Marshawn Lloyd, I mean, he could have a step up year. Josh Jacobs, obviously the top guy, but you don't want to wear him out throughout the season. So Lloyd, possibly could be that RB2 and help this team out to give Jacobs, some rest on the sideline and still be really productive. Um, Thinking defensively, is there anybody who maybe could step up? I mean, there's not really many people defensively that I think would be able to step up to have a breakout season for Green Bay. So moving on to the Texans, where they say both Iowa State receivers, Higgins and Knoll, who definitely could have much improved seasons. Nico Collins, obviously the top guy, but Higgins and Knoll definitely could um be those wide receiver 2 and 3 and have this offense, which was really bad, um, hopefully be better. Like Higgins and Knoll started, as the season went along, started to play better and were able to earn Stroud's trust. So maybe another year, um, another year in Houston with CJ Stroud. Maybe these guys can give this offense more playmakers on the outside, which they didn't really have, like, really ever since 2023, and at least some points in 2024. Houston had at least like really reliable weapons on the outside that made it, I think, easier to be able to run the ball for Houston. But when Tank Dell went down and when Christian Kirk was traded, um, or not Christian, they traded for Christian Kirk last year, but I forget who else was in that room. Or Stephon Diggs left, right? And they kind of had to bring in new guys, and the injuries and these two guys being rookies really, I think, hurt this offense to where they didn't have a lot of playmakers on the outside, making it easier for defenses to be able to stop the run and make Houston, you know, being like third and long and having to not be the greatest throughout the game. Went on to the Colts where they say Latu and Josh Downs, and I agree with both. Downs, I think, is definitely going to have to step up. Michael Pittman traded the Steelers. Alec Pierce paid like he's the top guy in that receiver room. So Downs is going to have to step up. He was really good his rookie year. Last couple of years, he's been solid, but I don't think as good. So I do think Downs, especially entering a contract season, is going to have to prove that he can be that secondary receiver alongside Pierce. Because this Colts offense, under Shane Steichen, is hoping to be as good as they were early on in the season last year, especially hopefully once Daniel Jones um, is fully healthy. So I don't think Downs is going to have to be and have to step up and really prove that he can be that secondary guy alongside Pierce. And then Latu, I think, will step up. Like this Colts defense, it's really solid. Like there's not many brand names outside of like him, Sauce. Um, that's really it. So, and they're bringing a lot of rookies into this. Um, they're bringing a lot of rookies into this defense from the draft because and they lost guys in free agency and had to fill holes. So I think Latu could, year two under Lou Anarumo, could have that breakout season, especially no Trey Hendrickson, which a lot of people thought he might have gone to Indy. Maybe Latu can prove that he can be that elite pass rusher for the Colts and get paid next off season. Moving on to the Jags, they say Travis Hunter and Antonio Johnson. Yeah, I do think Hunter will be better. Now that he's going to be more of a full time corner and like a rotational receiver, which was always my thought um when he was entering the draft. Like it made sense that like you have him be a full time corner because I thought he was a better corner prospect than receiver prospect. And also corner, you usually have your two boundary guys, your slot guy. You don't usually rotate those guys in and out. While for receiver, you more so, rotate, guys out in certain packages and certain situations. So it made more sense that Travis Hunter would be more of a rotational receiver and that he'd be a full time corner. So I do think now that Jacksonville's pivoted to that, where he's a full time corner, so he's gonna be a corner, and then like they'll work him in sometimes on the offensive side too. So because he's great on both sides of the ball, but he needed to play one position full time and then the other one some of the time, and it made sense that way. So I do think um healthy Travis Hunter now having a true position and not having to switch between offense and defense, I think he'll be able to settle in and help this Jags team out to prove that last year wasn't just a fluke season. And then Antonio Johnson, another young guy in that secondary, I think definitely could help out. Um, you know, they've yeah, they've lost couple of guys in free agency the last couple of years, so I think they will be able. I think Antonio Johnson will be able to skyrocket and really um, help out this defense. You could also go BTJ. Maybe he has a bounce back year and really proves that that last year was just a fluke and that he'll be more consistent this year. But you could also say it's not really a breakout year because he broke out his rookie year. Um, Parker Ross, Parker Washington, I think could have a breakout season. Even Brennan Strange, um, both um, end contract, entering contract seasons. Both will be free this next year, so I could see them both um, playing up to it and having breakout seasons this upcoming year um, to want to get paid. Moving on to the Chiefs, where they say Josh Simmons and No Williams, and I agree. Like Josh Simmons, I think he dealt with a lot of off the field stuff last year that made him miss some games, and he was also a rookie tackle, which is one of the more harder positions in the NFL to dominate as a rookie because in college you're going up against like you're especially a guy like Josh Simmons who was at Ohio State. You're gonna be dominating, most people that you play. But in the NFL, these edges and D tackles are much, stronger and bigger. So it takes guys usually a couple of years on the offensive line to really be able to settle in and be better. So I do think year two, he will improve and be, a really really one of the best young tackles in the league. And then Bill Williams, one of the young DBs they selected, will have to improve because they lost both Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie in free agency. One was a trade, one was a signing. Um, so both, so he's going to have to step up and show that he can be a reliable guy. And I think he will because the Chiefs in recent years have been able to hit on later round corners and make them into studs. The Jarius Sneed, um, Jalen Watson, Josh Williams. Like they've been able to hit on a lot of these later round corners. So I think he'll be able to break out and really be able to um, keep the secondary as one of the best in the league. Moving on to the Raiders, they say Ashton Genty and Trey Tucker, and I agree. I think Genty with a better offensive line, which was always going to be a problem, but everybody just kind of threw it away. Kind of like Jeremiah Love, where it's like everybody was just like, ooh, a running back, we should select them. Not really thinking about the offensive line. So better offensive line, better offensive scheme. Jetty, I think, should be much better and should show why he was the fifth overall pick. And Trey Tucker, yeah, I think him, Jack Bash, even Dante Thornton, um, all could, all three young receivers in this Clint Kubiak offense could have much better years and give this Raiders offense a much better um a much better young core than most people probably think they have. Um on the defense, there's not many good players outside of Crosby, so I don't think you can really name any of them. But yeah, I think Genty, Tucker, Bash, Thornton all could have breakout seasons and prove to be a young um, piece on this offense for the Raiders going into the future. But on to the Chargers with Mary Hampton. Yeah, I think Hampton dealt with injuries. So he wasn't fully healthy throughout the year, which I think affected his play. I also think the improved offensive line will definitely have this guy playing better because with the healthy tackles, the better interior offensive line, Hampton should get better running lanes and should be able to um, really improve as a sophomore because he was really good his rookie year, and then um, it's just he wasn't able to play as great as most people thought because of how bad the offensive line is. I also think Trey Harris could have a breakout year, second year receiver, maybe taking over, especially if Quentin Johnston maybe is traded. He could step into that wide receiver two role. I think Dan Henley, um, and a couple of corners, I think could have breakout seasons for the Chargers. I know Jesse Minter isn't there, but I do think um, this defense will still be really solid, and I think could have some breakout candidates um, alongside the veterans they have in Derwin James and Khalil Mack. Moving on to the Rams, they say Blake Corum, which is an interesting pick. The Rams, they don't have many like young studs that like you would say, oh, because most of the guys are, veteran guys who are already proven. Um, I mean, you could say maybe Tutu Atwell could have a breakout season and really prove to be that wide receiver three to help this offense. Furthermore, maybe one of the young tight ends that they drafted in recent years could step up and have a bigger role in this offense. You could also say maybe Brandon Fisk or Kobe Turner could, yeah, or Byron Young even could break out and get that and be able to prove, especially Young and Turner, who both are ending contract years. Cam Kitchens could have a um, sophomore jump or third year maybe. I think he was a 20.5 pick, so he could step up. But Corum could also maybe be that running back too and help this Rams offense be, even better than it is already. Put on to the Dolphins. We also have the Vikings out here. They said Malik Willis, which I do think he'll be really good this year. I don't know about breakout year just because Miami's offense isn't the greatest, so I don't know how much he's going to be throwing the ball. I feel like it's more going to be a running game with Devon A. Chan and Willis's legs. But I do think he'll break out and prove to be a legit um, franchise quarterback. You could also say, trying to think of like the defensive, Job Robinson. I think could have a breakout year, proving that his rookie year was a fluke. Maybe Kenneth Grant, who had a not great rookie year. Maybe he could be able to break out under Jeff Hafley. Um, yeah, some of the young defensive players that the Dolphins are drafting in recent years, maybe they're able to break out under Hafley and have this defense playing much better than a lot of people anticipate. Maybe Malik Washington could emerge. No more Waddle or Tyreek. Miami's going to have to find their top guy. Washington, third year in the league, or maybe fourth year in the league, could definitely emerge as that guy. Minnesota, they say Dallas Turner, which I definitely could see. Turner definitely um, has had an up and down first couple of years, but with no more Jonathan Grenard, who's in Philly, um, and with that edge group, not being the greatest, I think Turner's going to have to step up and show that he was worth that first round pick. Because so far in 2024, Minnesota's draft is not looking good with J.J. McCarthy, Dallas Turner. They didn't have many other picks since then, so I think Turner's going to have to break out in year three and show that he can really be this dynamic player. Um, Trying to think else, maybe. I mean, Ty Felton, who they drafted last year at the end of the third round out of Maryland, I think could step up. Jalen Naylor, no longer guard. He's in Vegas. So they have Jefferson and Addison, but they brought in Jawan Jennings, but I think Ty Felton could emerge, as a reliable weapon for Kyler or McCarthy, whoever ends up being the starter. And maybe J.J. McCarthy has a breakout year. Maybe year three, fully healthy, much better. Maybe he wins the job and plays really well. But we'll have to see about that. What about Patriots with Travion Henderson? I agree. Henderson had a really solid um, rookie year, really started to play better as the season went along. So I do think with a improved offensive line, with improved outside weapons, I think Henderson could definitely, have better lanes to run through, and he would be able to really emerge as like New England's new top rusher. Because Ramondre Stevenson, is all right, but he has falling issues, and he probably isn't in New England's future plans. Henderson is, and I think he could break out. You could also say Kyle Williams, um, who could break out. I'm trying to think anybody on the defense. Maybe Christian Barmore could break out um, after having that scare last year, um, or whether or not he'd be playing um, in New England ever again. So maybe he, fully healthy or fully healthy throughout the entire process could emerge as another defensive lineman to help. Trying to think who else. I think that's it for what I think. Saints. I mean, I think everybody's saying Tyler Shuck played really well down the stretch, especially as a dual threat quarterback where he was really solid. So maybe Shuck now that he's going to be the starter throughout mini camp and OT and training camp, getting those first team reps should help him with the new weapons he has. And I do think Shuck definitely could emerge as one of the best young QBs in the league. Um, you maybe could say Chris Olave could have a breakout year too, because he's a really solid receiver. But maybe a lot of people think that you know the injury concerns are more of a reason to think that he isn't as good. So maybe now with Shuck, because the QBs he played with have not been very good. So maybe with Shuck, um, Olave could break out to being one of the best young receivers in the league. Yeah, about on defense, there's not really many people because the defense is not very good. So, but maybe Chase Young breaks out and emerges as like New Orleans' top edge, and we finally see that Ohio State form again, and he's able to like take over games, and New Orleans has a hidden gem. Um, Moving on to the Giants with Abdul Carter. I mean, I agree. I mean, it is a little unknown Giants just because they just have so many edges and outside linebackers to where it's like who is going to be the starters, who is going to be on the sideline backing up. So I think Carter should, like him and Brian Burns, I think should be the starters. And Thibodeau, if he's still on the team, and Arvell Reese as the backup guys. Um, but Carter, I definitely could see having a breakout season as a sophomore. New DC, which will hopefully be better than the prior DC they have, and um, and so Carter, I think, should improve. Like he played really well down the stretch, and I think he'll continue to play well and dominate the way I thought he was going to as a rookie. Went on to the Jets. They say Mason Taylor, which you know you would think he would have, but they draft Kenyon Sadiq, so a crowded tight end room. Will Taylor be able to get the touches that you would hope he would? I was gonna say, um, well, being on defense, like maybe, there's not many players on the Jets I really think could have a breakout year just because of how bad the team is. Like they have some good players, but I don't know if those guys are really going to be better. Maybe, Tavondre Sweat or Ozzie Smith, maybe Adonai Mitchell, some of the guys they've gotten in some of those trades when they moved on from Sauce, Quinn Williams, and Jermaine Johnson. Maybe those guys in new situations could improve, but the Jets have a lot of talent, or not a lot of talent. They have a lot of young guys, but not many great players to really say they can be a breakout candidate. Eagles, Jahad Campbell. Yeah, I agree. Especially now that no more Nakobe Dean, so it'll be Bond and Campbell, hopefully for the full season as the linebackers. So I think Jahad will definitely year two under Vic Fangio definitely show the improvement. He can even be off the edge as an edge rusher to help this team out. To the Steelers, they go Derek Harmon. I mean, I can see it. I mean, you look at that Steelers roster, there's not many players that maybe you think could break out. Maybe Roman Wilson now that he doesn't have to be like a top guy, but he's been up and down his first couple of years, and I don't know if the offense is ever going to get better. Um, I mean, you look at that Steelers team; it's mostly older veteran players. Like maybe one of the tackles, like maybe Fatanu. If Broderick Jones does play this year, maybe he can have a breakout year. Maybe McCormick or Zach Frazier on the interior. It's very hard to figure out for the Steelers. San Fran, Ricky Pearsall I think should because Brandon Ayuk is definitely not going to be playing. I don't know what's going on with him and all that, but Pearsall is going to have to. Pearsall is definitely going to have to um, step up, especially in the contract year. But San Fran's weapons aren't the greatest. Like you have Kendrick Bourne, who's all right, and they didn't draft some. They drafted Deshaun Strickland. They brought in Mike Evans, but like, there's not many great weapons. And with George Kittle coming off that injury that he suffered in the wild card, I think Pearsall is going to have to show improvement for the 49ers because this offense outside of Christian McCaffrey is like not the greatest. And if the Niners truly want to contend, this offense is going to have to look a lot better than it has. Seahawks, Rashid Shaheed, and Byron Murphy. I agree. I mean, Shaheed was a great trade by John Snyder at the deadline. Should only get better. I know Clint Kubiak isn't there, but I do think this offense will still be really good. And I think Shaheed, year two in Seattle, I think will only get better his first full year. I could also see Torrey Horton stepping up, who was a steal in 2024. Byron Murphy, yeah, I mean, he was really solid, but I do think he definitely could um, emerge as one of the best young defensive tackles of the year. Nicky Manwari, I think, could go from young up and coming to superstar. Seattle did lose a lot of pieces on the defensive side that I think could lead to other young guys that drafted in recent years to step up and play bigger roles. Tampa with Benjamin Morrison, I think him or Jacob Harris, definitely could because no more Jamel Dean, he's gone. Zion McCollum, really solid, one of the better young corners, but Tampa's defense, the reason why they didn't make the playoffs was injury, and the defense wasn't as great as it had been. So I think they are going to need to have one of these corners step up. Like Emeka Buka or one of the receivers is going to have to step up because over Mike Evans, who will be that reliable target for Baker? I know with Buka played well early on, but his play did start to deteriorate. Bucky Irving, I know he had a really good rookie year, but we're gonna have to see if he can be that dominant um guy and truly be Tampa's go-to weapon out of the backfield. Tennessee, I mean, Cam Ward, I think is definitely going to improve, especially with a better coaching staff, better talent around him. Ward should definitely be better, and Tennessee, I do believe will. Yeah, I definitely believe Tennessee will be improved, and I think Cam Ward definitely will be better this upcoming year. And then finally with Washington, Josh Connolly Jr., which I do think um could definitely see that, struggled. Also was playing a new position because at Oregon, he was a left tackle. They draft him, they move him to right tackle. So it was an adjustment period for Connolly, who definitely had his ups and downs as a rookie. But I definitely do think he can improve um, and become one of the better young tackles in the league, especially if Washington stays healthier this year and people, are talking about Washington as the season gets later into the year. Connerly definitely will be a name people know. And yeah, that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys liked it. And let me know down in the comments who you think will be a breakout candidate for your favorite team. And 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 also like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. But till then, hope you have a great day and bye.